mindset orang Amerika di negara Amerika dan orang Amerika di negara Malaysia, ya ini pengakuannya ternyata memiliki mindset yang berbeda, guys. Nah, ini menarik ya untuk dibahas. Lalu tadi ada lagi, guys, ya. Coba Anda bayangkan bahwa pengalaman dia selama 30 tahun hidup di Amerika itu semua hilang, guys. Semua hilang, lenyap karena ia temukan hal ini di Malaysia. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat datang, selamat berjumpa lagi hari ini bersama saya Indra SFN yang tentunya akan selalu setia menyapa teman-teman semua di sana dan mendoakan agar kita dalam keadaan baik-baik saja, sehat senantiasa jasmani juga rohaninya, serta segala bentuk pekerjaan apapun di dalam maupun di luar rumah. Semoga juga diberikan kemudahan dan kelancaran oleh Tuhan yang Maha Kuasa. Amin, amin ya Rabbal Alamin. Baik, sedikit saya bercerita bahwa mau tidak mau, suka atau tidak suka, ya, kemajuan negara Malaysia itu semakin melesat jauh, ya, di setiap harinya itu dirasakan oleh banyak orang di sana, guys. Termasuk para turis-turis asing yang mengakui hal tersebut. Mereka sangat betah, mereka sangat nyaman, mereka sangat ingin berlama-lama di negara Malaysia. Coba saya tanya kepada Anda, apakah ada terdengar turis asing yang ingin segera keluar dari Malaysia ketika mereka sampai di negara itu? Apakah ada? Malah kebalikannya, guys, ya. Yang saya rasakan, yang saya lihat, kebanyakan turis asing di sana merasa nyaman dan melihat betapa megahnya, betapa majunya negara Malaysia, dan ini diakui setiap hari, ya, guys, ya. Dan ini juga akan mendongkrak, memotivasi negara-negara yang ada di sekitar agar tidak mau kalah di segi kemajuan ini, guys, ya, dari sektor apapun itu termasuk pariwisata. Nah, kejadian yang sama dialami oleh pria ini, guys, ya. Ini adalah pria asal Kanada yang mana dia secara serius menyatakan bahwa kemajuan Malaysia sekarang sudah tidak bisa dipandang enteng lagi, guys. Nah, di sini dia membandingkan negara Malaysia bukan dengan negara tetangga-tetangga terdekat, ya, guys, ya. Melainkan dia berani membandingkan negara Malaysia dengan negara Amerika. Nah, guys, ini sangat mengejutkan, guys, ya. Sebenarnya ada beberapa hal yang telah saya reaksi yang sama topiknya seperti ini, guys, ya. Seperti stasiun dan lain-lain, ya, guys, ya. Namun itu hanyalah pikiran dari beberapa atau segelintir orang saja, guys. Nah, dia mengakui bahwa sudah lebih dari 30 tahun dia di Amerika, ya, dan sudah mulai berani untuk membandingkan dengan negara Malaysia yang hanya dia di sana mungkin beberapa waktu saja, guys. Nah, ini kita lihat, ya, guys, ya, perbandingan versi dari turis asing ini, guys, ya. Apa saja yang akan dia bandingkan? Oke, tanpa banyak basa-basi, karena saya juga penasaran, ya. Ini Malaysia dengan Amerika loh, guys, ya. Oke, langsung aja kita mereaksi video itu sekarang juga.
Okay, I need to talk about the quality of life difference between here in Malaysia and back home in the United States of America. It's much different than you'd probably think. It's much different than people are led to believe. The way that we live in America and just the quality of life overall. Now, I spent over 30 years in America. Grew up in Philadelphia, 2 hours from New York. Ended up moving to New York City and spent the last 6 years or so in New York City. And New York is its own beast. It's completely different than the rest of the US. But I have a bit of a grasp on the rest of the US as well. Spent time in Los Angeles, I've traveled around, but I just want to compare the baseline things, cost of living, cleanliness, crime. These are the things that really impact the quality of life. These are the most important things for me. So when it comes to cost of living, it has become almost impossible to survive in America on a low wage, let's say. On a normal wage almost. You can survive, yes, but you can barely live. Now, what I mean by that is you can go to work day in and day out. You can come home. You can afford your rent and your food, assuming you have a job, which is also not so easy to come by some places. It's becoming more and more difficult to actually land a job that pays decent. And so this is, as a single guy, I'm mostly talking from the perspective of a single guy. If you have a family, that just adds such another level of difficulty to the whole thing. So yeah, America has become very difficult in that regard. The economy is bad. Things are not great in that regard. Now, coming to Malaysia, it's a polar opposite. I'm not going to go and say, oh, Malaysia's so cheap,
Malaysia
or this or that.
Sebaliknya dari
I know people
Amerika,
don't
guys.
like when I say it's cheap here. Even though I don't say things like this coming from a Western mindset or comparing it to Western wages. You know, I live on a salary that of the average Malaysian person or less, no more than that. And so I have quite a perspective of similar to what a local makes, the average local. Maybe this is more in Kuala Lumpur. Of course, the wages get less as you go around the country, but not everywhere. And so, yeah, Malaysia is affordable. Kuala Lumpur is affordable. Here in Penang, it's affordable. I make $1,000 US a month, roughly. And I can live a good life here. It's a whole different thing. It's a night and day difference to America. And I assume the same to Australia and the UK and Canada, which are quite similar to the US in costs and also in other parts of life. You know, it's very similar. Now, not everything is about money, but you need money in order to live day to day comfortably and not stress. And yeah, so money tends to consume people, and money tends to dictate most people's choice of where they live. You know, back in America, people seek out the cheapest states and cities and will oftentimes move their whole family to a different state. They'll leave the rest of their family, extended family, and take their, you know, husband or wife and kids and yeah, go somewhere a little cheaper, but stay in the US. This has happened in my family. And it's pretty common. It's just people grow up in areas which they realize as they become an adult are unlivable. New York City, even like Philadelphia, for example, super expensive, very expensive cities to live in a decent apartment. You're looking at spending $2,000 a month or more for a studio in Philadelphia, oftentimes. New York, same thing, more, $3,000 US per month. Put that into perspective, it's crazy.
Mahal juga
15,000
ya.
ringgit per month for a studio apartment.
15.000 ringgit, guys.
It's crazy. Of course, you can find that kind of thing here, but it's not the norm. It's not common. It's not what you would expect to pay. You're finding places here for $200, $300, $400 US. You can get a nice,
dengan yang ada di
nice
Malaysia ya,
place
guys.
in most areas in Malaysia. It's just the reality. It's a complete difference. So, for me, when it comes to costs,
Sangat jauh sekali perbedaannya.
it's much more manageable here, and that alone ups the quality of life tenfold. I can eat how I want to eat. I can live in a decent apartment, and I have extra spending money. I can save money. There's no saving money back home. There's no saving money. So that's the biggest thing, cost of living. Now, I'm not going to sit here and trash Americans, say Americans are bad or anything like this, but as a whole, as a generalization, especially in New York City, if you are walking around, if you're going about your day, you are very rarely interacting with other people. You are very rarely having these positive micro interactions throughout your day. Of course, it can happen and you can force it, but in general, people are in their own world. They're in their own bubble. They are not super smiley and cheery all the time. It's a byproduct of life there. It's just how things go. And I myself notice I will start to act more like that being around it. And so everyone feeds off of each other's energy and it becomes a little bit cold. It becomes cold. You know, if you are Malaysian and you visit the US, especially in one of the bigger cities, you will feel a completely different feeling than you feel here, even in Kuala Lumpur, even in the thick of it, in the busy city. It's different, you know, it's different. And I think American people are great. You know, there's no problem with Americans or any one type of person. You know, it's more cultural, it's more how we become from living there. You know, you take most Americans and you bring them to Malaysia, or you meet other Americans here, it's a whole different feeling. I get a whole different feeling talking to Americans here versus talking to Americans back home. It's just different. Now, of course, seeing somebody else, meeting somebody else, coming from where you come from in a foreign country, you know, it's easier to connect. We have some mutual thing to talk about and connect on. And maybe we're also going to be more like-minded because we're both the types who are traveling across the world. You know, we are not the average American. We are not the typical, maybe basic American that you would come across. And so, yeah, maybe the Americans that you meet here, different than the Americans you would meet back in America, for the most part, you know? And it's just the truth. So here I have such an overwhelmingly positive experience with the people in general. On a day-to-day basis, my interactions, I have just many social interactions, many conversations that boost my happiness levels, that boost my quality of life. Having these interactions on a daily basis is important. You know, you walk away from each one of those moments feeling better, feeling good, feeling positive. And it makes me realize how few of those moments I was having throughout my life in general. You know, it comes to, you know, you don't realize it until you're here. You don't realize it until you're living somewhere like Malaysia that, oh wow, things can be different. Things, you know, social experience, the social whatever can be much different than what I've come to know. So it's cool. It's really cool, and it's refreshing, and it brings some new positive feelings to life. I'll say that. So far, cost, the people, two huge factors that are going to determine how happy you are in life. And I think happiness is kind of similar, equal to quality of life.
Dan satu hal yang membuat saya penasaran dari kata-kata turis asing ini, yaitu terkait tentang mentality tadi guys ya, atau mindset orang Amerika di negara Amerika dan orang Amerika di negara Malaysia. Ya, ini pengakuannya ternyata memiliki mindset yang berbeda guys. Nah, ini menarik ya untuk dibahas. Lalu tadi ada lagi guys ya, coba Anda bayangkan bahwa pengalaman dia selama 30 tahun hidup di Amerika itu semua hilang guys. Semua hilang, lenyap karena ia temukan hal ini di Malaysia. Yap, mengapa itu? Karena dia sudah berkeinginan untuk tinggal di Malaysia dan menjadi orang Amerikanya versi Malaysia. Yang dia katakan itu tadi guys, bahwa mentality, mindsetnya sudah berbeda dari kebiasaan orang Amerika yang ada di Amerika. Oke, di sini saya jelaskan sedikit. Ini adalah sesuatu yang pernah saya bahas sebelumnya ya, bahwa ini adalah pendapat dari saya guys ya, bahwa tidak semua negara maju itu seiring jalan dengan kemakmuran rakyatnya. Nah, sekarang coba kita pilih guys ya, mana yang lebih didahulukan, yaitu negara yang maju ataupun masyarakat yang makmur ya. Ini adalah pilihan nih guys ya. Kita lihat seumpama negara Malaysia, kita bahas nih guys ya, karena ini adalah pendapat menurut saya, boleh Anda setuju dan boleh Anda tidak setuju guys ya, karena ini hanyalah pendapat. Kita ambil contoh negara Amerika Serikat ya. Anda pasti tahu begitu sangat adikuasa, begitu sangat berpengaruhnya negara Amerika ini guys ya. Apa yang tidak ada di sana? Teknologi ya, kekuasaan, militer, dan juga lain sebagainya. Semua sudah tercukupi di negara tersebut, di benua itu guys ya. Tapi ya, dengan kemajuan negara itu, apakah serta-merta diiringi dengan kemakmuran masyarakatnya? Ternyata tidak ya guys. Karena negara maju seperti Amerika, Korea Selatan, bahkan banyak pengemisnya di sana, banyak orang terlantar, membawa anak untuk meminta-minta, dan lain sebagainya ya guys ya. Itu di Amerika. Coba kita bandingkan dengan negara yang ada di ASEAN ini, yaitu adalah seumpama Malaysia maupun Brunei Darussalam. Kita lihat deh guys ya, Malaysia dan juga Brunei. Kita bahas Brunei terlebih dahulu, bahwa di sana tuh walaupun negaranya hanya negara berkembang kita bahas, namun kita lihat dari sisi kemakmuran masyarakatnya itu tak bisa dibandingkan dari negara-negara lain, termasuk Amerika Serikat guys. Bahwa tingkat kemakmuran yang merata di seluruh pelosok, di seluruh tempat yang ada di negara Brunei Darussalam ya, itu membuat tingkat kebahagiaan dari rakyat tersebut itu tinggi guys. Bahkan Brunei ya mungkin bisa saya samakan dengan negara Oman ya. Oman juga begitu guys. Dia tidak mengedepankan kemajuan negaranya, tapi lebih memprioritaskan kemakmuran yang merata kepada seluruh masyarakat Oman. Bahkan saya mendapat kabar bahwa satu pun rakyat Oman itu tidak ada yang miskin, tidak ada yang berekonomi menengah ke bawah ya guys ya. Nah, sama juga dengan Malaysia. Malaysia seperti itu ya, tidak mengedepankan kemajuan negara, namun lebih kepada kemakmuran masyarakat itu sendiri guys. Memang kita tahu, kita juga berbangga bila negara kita maju, tapi bila itu disertai dengan kemakmuran masyarakat ya, jika itu tidak berimbang, tentu kita lebih harus memilih kemakmuran masyarakat yang merata daripada kemajuan sebuah negara. Itu adalah menurut pendapat saya, karena kita memiliki pandangan yang berbeda. Silakan Anda setuju dan juga tidak setuju, tidak mengapa. Oke, demikian tadi video aku. Semoga video ini bermanfaat bagi kita semua, dan aku mohon undur diri. Mohon maaf jika ada kesalahan kata, kesalahan sikap kepada Anda semua, karena saya ini hanyalah manusia biasa guys, yang tak luput dari kesalahan, dan aku mohon undur diri. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.